My biggest learning is that you can't start off a company with just one idea. It has to be a one product, right? It has to have a bigger picture. Founders today, when they're raising capital, they're basically not getting access to utilize that money in the correct manner. The only word that they use for the founder, Adam Newman, throughout is that you have fortitude. Fortitude basically means the ability to turn things around when things aren't working well. If you're running a company burning cash with the assumption that after 3 years I will make a certain amount of money from this user, and that is where I am on a 4:1 LTV CAC ratio or whatever it is. That is where things sort of go south.
Calm down before you stress up the groove. The energy a little different when the blessings accrue.
शार्क टैंक इंडिया को देखकर हम सबको स्टार्टअप्स में इन्वेस्ट करने का मन तो बहुत कर रहा था, पर हम कर नहीं पाते थे. बट अ प्लेटफॉर्म लाइक टाइक चेंजेस दैट. टुडे वी इंटरव्यूड करण मेहरा, हु इज द को फाउंडर एट टाइक. टाइक हम जैसे रिटेल इन्वेस्टर्स को स्टार्टअप्स में इन्वेस्ट करने देता है. इट इज़ अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग प्रोडक्ट, बट उससे भी ज़्यादा इंटरेस्टिंग है इनकी जर्नी कि ये यहाँ तक आए कैसे और कर क्या रहे हैं, फ्यूचर प्लान्स क्या है, कंपनी का मिशन और विजन क्या है और किस तरीके से ये कंपनी बिल्ड कर रहे हैं, इसके बारे में हमने बात करी. If you are a future startup founder, I would recommend this episode for you. And if you like this episode, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. हफ्ते में 2 बार हम podcast episode लेकर आते हैं. Hey Karan, welcome to the CNTC show. How are you doing?
Hey Ayush, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to have a chat with you. I've been going through your previous work, and I think I have a lot to live up to.
I'm so excited about this conversation. Like your journey as well is extremely inspiring. We're just talking about it. I wanna take a step back and we'll talk about the company and the entrepreneur stuff. But I wanna probably rewind like 5-6 years in your life and just dive deeper into your dreams and ambitions and how they've changed over the course of when you were a kid, school, college, first job, and now Tyke. What was that journey like?
Oh, absolutely. I come from a business plus financial family.
Hmm.
So it was always about more finance, less business, surprisingly.
Okay.
Uh, and so I pursued chartered accountancy, did it in the way it was supposed to happen. And I started working at Deloitte in M&A and corporate restructuring.
ओके.
Uh,
इसका मतलब
till
क्या है?
till
एमएनए और कॉर्पोरेट रिस्ट्रक्चरिंग का मतलब क्या होता है?
what M&A and corporate restructuring basically means is that today, whenever a company is looking at expansion, there are various ways to expand. The first way is that the company can either invest resources in in its own company and
Hmm.
build it internally, right?
Okay.
For early stage companies, it might not be that difficult, but once you grow and scale, there are systems and processes in place, and it turns out to be more expensive sometimes. Uh, so what people do is they go forward and look at partnership opportunities, which is something which we call mergers and acquisitions. So you either merge with a company or you acquire another company, which is doing something you want to do.
Hmm.
In both these cases, it's you're actually purchasing something or you're getting access to something which is not your own, which sometimes turns out to be a better alternative. That's what mergers
Interesting.
and acquisitions are. Corporate restructuring is basically once again companies expand, they open new operations in different parts of the world. Uh, it affects the way taxes and compliance acts on every single stakeholder involved. So they have
Okay.
to restructure their company in a manner which can now become an organization and an institution rather than just uh, a particular uh, single company. So the work that goes behind that processes
Hmm.
and the earlier part is what we used to do there.
Interesting. And how did, of course this was the part after your probably you'd done your education. I'm sure you do,
Yeah.
like what you thought of Tyke, it must be in the making, like in like there are multiple years that Tyke was in the making. It's just that it blew up probably in the last couple of years in terms of like that idea in your head. But वो entrepreneurship thinking पहले से थी, वो dreams पहले से थे या वो एकदम आए?
No, so I don't think that was the case with me, Ayush.
Hmm.
I never thought of uh, pursuing entrepreneurship. Actually, I was thinking of pursuing further studies.
Hmm.
Uh, I actually didn't think about the fact that, hey, you know what, let's quit and start a company tomorrow. I was pretty
Okay.
happy. I think I was learning good stuff, and I did not think about entrepreneurship. Though, yeah, the part um, where being your own boss and stuff like that was sometimes uh, hitting my head, but it was very, I would say, it was not enough to make the leap because I didn't have anything solid I could
Right.
think of. Right, the only thing I could consider in terms of entrepreneurship would probably be joining my family business at that point of time.
Okay.
So yes, so there was nothing of that sort, at least at my side, uh, which I was discussing with you earlier as well, Ayush, that I think uh, entrepreneurship sometimes is an outcome of being restless about something, right? Uh, and that was the case with me. With Tyke, eventually the idea started because of my experience with the entire process that is involved in such deals and investments in general,
Hmm.
uh, which allowed me to think that, you know what, why can't there be something better? Why can't there be a better process for investments to happen, for acquisitions to happen, for increasing the TAM of people who are investing in private companies, right? So why can't these things be explored? Because they seem pretty interesting to me, but it wasn't happening whenever I spoke to anybody. Uh, so it was more of restlessness that made me want to take the leap. Another thing which was there was FOMO as well, as you rightly said. FOMO, not from the perspective कि सब लोग entrepreneur बन रहे हैं, but FOMO that if I don't do this, someone else will, and
Right.
that's something which will not sit with me.
मतलब मैंने ये प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व नहीं करी आज तो लाइक किसी और ने कर दी तो बहुत बहुत बुरा लगेगा कि ये कर सकता था मैं.
Yeah, because
इंटरेस्टिंग.
because what happens is sometimes is that I run a fintech company. I'm not building some crazy robotic company, right? Which is something which has a crazy level of uh,
राइट.
expertise involved, right? For us, it was just taking it live and taking it out in a certain legal and a compliant manner. So maybe this is a creator syndrome, but once you figure something out, you think anybody else can as well, right?
राइट.
So that was also something which allowed me. Like for example, let's say you're doing this podcast, you've been fairly successful with it. Uh, Sometimes you may be thinking that yeah, ये तो कोई भी कर सकता है, right? Obviously, the point is that your audience is different, the way you do it is different, but it's
राइट.
that it's that creator syndrome which always kicks in. That okay, you know what? What's so mind blowing about
करेक्ट.
this, right?
It does, and I think especially for creators, right? After a point of time, it's very easy, especially the kind of growth that creators are seeing right now. It's explosive growth for a lot of them. I know people who have been making content for the last 5 years are at probably 100K subscribers, but this one kid has been making content for 5 months, has a million subscribers. So even the
Absolutely.
algorithm can be, I wouldn't call it unfair, but could be in favor of somebody else than you, or the audience's interests could be in favor of somebody else's. So that always hits you that, am I doing something different at all, especially in the product business. If you look at a lot of, in fact, fintech companies as well today, copying products has been like a regular exercise now. One company comes up with a very unique offering, and then another company comes up with a very similar offering, right? So even after that, it comes down to what story you are telling, what's your brand like. Do you have that loyal audience that you can sell your vision and mission to? One thing that really excites me about, like we were talking about audiences and people starting up, is that I get a lot of these questions on my Instagram that I'm a college, so I started up in college, and people resonate with the story and tell me that यार मैं college के अंदर हूँ, I'm from a tier 2 tier 3 college and I really really want to start up because of XYZ फलाना का reason. मतलब कुछ there is no particular thought process which is driven by a
Yeah. Yeah.
framework or a problem. मुझे startup करना है, but because of some reasons I saw कुणाल शाह का एक speech देख लिया मैंने, I saw some ex entrepreneur का कुछ देख लिया, मुझे startup करना है. And like you said, right, like you started up because you had that burning problem ki boss, I have to solve this. For somebody who doesn't have that burning problem, what do you think should be like an ideal roadmap to start up?
Uh, Look, I may have a very different view on this, but I think
Hmm.
you need to acquire domain expertise in a particular segment.
Okay.
Uh, You need to work very closely with people who are industry leaders in that particular segment. And I think sooner or later you are going to come across some problems, some loopholes, some hierarchy, uh, which is there because it's there, right? There is no reason for it to be there. It's just there because that's how things have been going all this while, right? So
Right.
that will be your cue in terms of, you know what, do I have what it takes to build this, sell this, and market this, right? So I think because I personally think if you want to start up, uh, just because you want to start up, things get very difficult very often, right? Uh, I've never heard any startup founder complaining about the fact that uh, I work the entire week, I'm traveling at very odd hour flights, I'm staying in budget hotels because we can't spend so much money. Uh, no one's complaining because they understand the fact that uh, this problem is big enough, right? So the problem with starting off without having restlessness is your urge to give up is slightly higher compared to the other one.
Interesting. As you said, right, that as a startup founder, you're taking probably flights at odd hours and not sleeping some nights. I think that's fairly regular and becomes part of the routine. Like it doesn't feel like how it's glorified on Twitter or LinkedIn. It doesn't
Yeah,
feel like
yeah,
that when you're actually executing things.
yeah.
Like I want to dive deeper into your personal life since you are a young company but growing at a very very fast pace that comes with a lot of responsibility and you are a first time entrepreneur, so I want to know very very candidly, are you getting time for things other than work? If yes, how are you managing that time? Because uh, personally I am like I struggle with this a lot, right? How much time do I give my partner, my friends, my family? What's your like distribution of time like what is how is personal Karan is like?
No, so when you are in the 0 to 1, or when you're in the MVP stage, when you're building something for the
Hmm.
first time, it's just ground up, you've not raised any capital. At that time, you can't think about these things, right? Because that time also you shouldn't, because you're just starting off. That adrenaline boost should just do that for you. But I also personally think that it's very foolish of entrepreneurs to think that they have to do everything themselves. It's actually very similar to being over possessive with your partner, right? Uh, so once you have PMF, once the product is in the market, once you've raised a decent amount of capital, you need to use that capital to hire people who do those things for you, right? Because uh, a sales call or a marketing pitch or a partnership agreement or any of these things which are not creative in nature should not uh, take up your time, right? One of our mentors at Tyke has said that you need to work on one process only once until it is done, right? You can't do the same process again in your company because that is not efficient utilization of your own time. Typically, what happens is most founders don't understand that, okay, my time also has value, right? Because they're generally not paying themselves that well. This is their full time job. This is what they're doing day in, day out, right? But they need to understand that just from a opportunity cost point of view that, okay, you know what, if I wasn't doing this, if I wasn't on this sales call, but the other person was, could I build or disrupt something else? And could I squeeze the market, increase the TAM, and come up with a better opportunity? So coming back to your question, uh, person current now has good amount of time because we're a fairly decent sized company now. We're around 50 people, so we have people who know what they have to do and they do it. Uh, I think I would say that maybe a 10-20% more would be nice, but I'm not complaining.
Interesting. You said a very interesting thing about mentors giving you like an advice that of course comes from a lot of wisdom, experiences, their own mistakes.
Yeah.
We get this question a lot, which is finding mentors, and I've always struggled to answer this question because I've always felt that mentors have come very naturally. For you specifically speaking, do you have a framework that this is how one can find mentors for themselves?
Uh, for me, it is not about finding, but it is more about choosing, right? Because uh, typically the way it works for startups is that their mentors eventually becomes a board, and the board consists of investors, right?
Hmm.
I I don't fully agree. I partially agree with that. Uh, however, I think however, I think your mentors have to be people who've gone through something similar in the past. So in my case, I have some mentors who worked and have been successful in the fintech space, founded companies themselves, sold it, and have been successful, right? So
Right.
I and second is your mentor needs to have complete clarity and complete straightforwardness with you, right? I've seen a lot of times, a lot of questions come up, and I've asked it to people, and the answer is very like ghoom fira ke. And
Hmm.
I understand over there itself that okay, he does not know it, but he's trying to answer it in some way.
Right.
But I think with mentorship there has to be complete candidness, complete uh, uh, clarity, and complete straightforwardness in terms of who you go forward with. To find the right mentor is like finding the right uh, apartment for you, right? It you will have to see 20, 30 before and see what works for you.
Right.
Ideally, try making sure that the mentor has aligned interest with your success, which in today's world is as simple as asking him to write you a check in his company, your company.
Understood. So this is what I'm understanding. Skin in the game.
Yeah,
Like if you can make them
yeah,
invest in your company, even if it's a small amount, make them do
yeah,
that. Second is, I think domain expertise is very important so that they don't like you don't get a media like you don't get we won't have the same mentors, right? Like my mentors would be very different than your mentors. Third is that they have to be extremely candid, straightforward, honest with you. Like if you're doing something wrong, they have to call it out. Like they have to call your bullshit. That's very important. I think I'd add one more thing. I really feel like there have been mentors that two people give me the same feedback. One person induces anxiety that what am I doing? Another person induces hope that okay, right now I'm making a mistake, I can do this better. And I really feel that like as the Gen Zs or the millennials say that the mentor that you vibe with more is the one that I would
yeah,
prefer choosing
yeah.
because
Sure.
feedback can really get you in this journey because it's not an easy journey. I mean, what do you think about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Uh, so that's how you find or choose, right? But it's like a product funnel. That's how you acquire, right? But what
Hmm.
you said is about retaining a mentor. Like, how do you retain that mentor, right? Which is what you said.
Correct.
But I'd add another point in retention, right?
Hmm.
So another thing about mentorship is that that person should be genuinely concerned about your well-being and should be concerned about how you're doing, which means it's not always you who's sending that text saying, hey, can we speak? Maybe he's asking some questions, or maybe he's sharing something with you, he or she, whatever it
Interesting.
is. So I think I think over a period of time there will be some level of concern as well, which develop, which is a personal relationship, and you must have one with someone you look up to.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I want to quickly like
Yeah,
ask a super like off-topic question. What does Karan hate about the startup ecosystem?
I think what I hate about the ecosystem right now is that
Hmm.
because people have done things a certain way, uh, and they've been successful, where those things have nothing to do with the way they've done things. It automatically becomes a rule book that हमें भी ऐसे ही करना है for every budding entrepreneur, because of the if you do this way, because that person got Sequoia to invest, that will also happen with you. But that's not how it works,
Right.
right? So I think independent thinking is lacking in today's startup ecosystem.
Interesting. One thing which you said about it, I think like a couple of answers ago is salaries, right? Initially, founders even don't get paid a lot. Like I know people who are very new to the startup ecosystem and very rightly so their thought process is that कंपनी ने 10 मिलियन उठा लिया तो मतलब फाउंडर्स मालामाल हो गए रातों रात आज एक गाड़ी आएगी आज एक
Yeah,
घर खरीदा
yeah,
जाएगा.
yeah,
And so this
yeah,
was also a thought process which now I'm gonna move like one step further. I saw this post that was going viral on LinkedIn. I'm sure like the stats were put in a misleading way, but like it showed something that the CEO's salary has been shooting up like crazy, especially in bigger IT companies that have been profitable for some time now. And you know, people are getting paid 10 crores a year, 50, 60 crores a year, right? It's a big number for even for somebody at that position. Whereas the salaries of people who are just joining the company, freshers, are have not increased that much on an average scale. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think this is how it's supposed to be, or this disparity that's happening between the two is going to affect the ecosystem?
Look, talking about bigger companies, uh, there are two things, right? There are two types of bigger companies today. One is a company where the founder is still the CEO, and the second is where there is a CEO and the founder is long gone, right? Uh, in option number two, if it is performance based, sure, why not? Uh, but in option number one, I would say it shouldn't be that high, considering you also have stake. You also nowadays all founders are parts of ESOP pools as well, apart from their own stake. So I think in option number one, I would disagree, but option number two, if it is variable, if it is linked to performance, why not?
Interesting. And do you think the same kind of increase should happen in the fresher salary as well?
Look, I would disagree. I don't think that freshers need to be paid a lot to start, but I'm not a big fan of the appraisal cycle the way it works. So I would probably work on that rather than the entry price.
Right. By the way, what is an average CEO getting paid from like a seed level to then a pre-series A, series A, series B? Like what are the average salaries like? I'm sure like some companies would be an exception, but usually what are people paid?
So there are two ways of looking at it, right? The first way of looking at it is what were you making before joining this company? In my case, I'm not married. I was staying with my family, so it was I didn't have too many expenses as well, right? So I was okay with that part. Uh, in case of mature and I would say founders who are a certain age, they already are in that burden of 40, 50, 60 lakhs of expenses yearly, and they anyways are coming from companies where they're making a crore or more as well, right?
Hmm.
For someone like this, uh, it is difficult to start off with no pay, because you have expenses, you have people to take care of, right? So what I have seen is that people of such stature, they look at a they look at a uh, pay cut which allows them to make their expenses happen, but they're not looking at making any savings. Uh, that's what I've seen. So there's definitely a pay cut. They don't pay themselves the way they would be paid at a Microsoft or at a bigger company. Uh, However, for early stage founders, I think most early stage founders start off with no pay. Uh,
Right.
the ones who don't have, I would say, expenses to take care of, which are not avoidable. So
Right.
there are two coins to it. Typically, the way it works out is that what I have seen is that in before you're funded, you don't make any money. That's your own savings anyway, which you're putting in the company. So there's no point making money. It's just a circle coming back, right? Uh,
Right.
Once you raise your first round of funding, I think founders typically make between uh, 12 to 50 lakhs, depending again
Right.
which stage you are, who are you, etc. And then I think it almost increases in a granular manner, sometimes double, sometimes by 30, 40% basis stages. What works for employees is they get a raise on a, but I think founders it's basis reaching milestones or reaching new rounds of capital.
Interesting. Now that we are talking about capital and investments, I think it's
Yeah.
time to also talk about Tyke. I want to know the story, right? Like not just the what, but the why of it. Exactly what was that point where you're like, yes, Tyke is the company that I want to start, and then do let us know exactly what does Tyke do? What are your plans moving forward? What's the vision? What's the mission statement? How are we moving forward with this?
So when we started off with Tyke, there was a very simple point that today the way banks function, the way banking works, the way investment banking or brokerage works. It is not built for startups. It is built taking in consideration your SMEs, your bigger corporates and your bigger organizations. It's not built considering the entire loss-making model, right? It's not built that way. Uh, that's the reason most banks today are pretty futile for startups until and unless you just want to bank your capital in an FD. That's the reason you're seeing a lot of new banks come up as well. So typically, what we saw is that today there is no banker or there is nobody in the industry who's genuinely solving for all the financial problems of a founder. And the problems are primarily uh, facilitating transactions, getting uh, financing, uh, working capital or otherwise, and managing the wealth that you accumulate, rather either as profits or as investments. Right? Typically, these are the three requirements that any startup has today, any founder has today. Founders today, when they're raising capital, they're basically not getting access to utilize that money in the correct manner, which means that they're not able to earn much out of that money. A, because they don't have a wealth manager at this stage, and they're not supposed to as well. It's too early. And number two, they're so focused on getting PMF, getting traction, getting the numbers right? So the money is just acting as a hedge in the bank. It's not doing much for you. Additionally,
Okay.
when you're raising this capital as well, the entire way in which the capital is being raised is a very tedious, long-term process. Takes tons of paperwork, tons of filing. You're charged approximately around 2 to 3% as hidden fees in forex spreads, transaction fees, all of that stuff, right? So uh, I say this in most of my sales meetings that typically a founder is losing out on his 3 years office rent uh, in just hidden charges to get the investment in, right? So
Right.
that's actually a very true stat as well. Uh,
Crazy.
so that's the goal. The goal with Tyke is that how do we become the capital and wealth partner uh, for companies, for startups today, so that we can facilitate all their investments, we can help them with bridge financing, and we can create wealth for them from their own money.
Very interesting, yeah. I think after Shark Tank, which I thought would bomb completely, and after it succeeded, the idea of startups is now much more talked about than it was. And once I see companies like Tyke doing what you're doing, right? Um, you've essentially made everybody startup investors. I had a very like silly question to ask, but once I invest through Tyke, let's say I invest like 5-10,000 rupees through Tyke, can I like now call myself an angel investor? Like, what does it actually become?
So I'll take it two steps back, right? So
Right.
the overall vision of Tyke is how do we help with capital and wealth for companies. But we started off the company, we started off with our first product in October last year, which is
Right.
called TykeInvest.com. Now, TykeInvest.com was trying to solve for the bridge financing piece in the entire jigsaw puzzle, right? So, uh, what we did is we realized that today everybody wants to invest in startups, but only a few do it, right?
Right.
The main reason was because A, there was no online play, so they had to do it completely offline. And number two,
Correct.
they didn't have access to opportunities, access, and they didn't have a very heavy wallet to invest as well. So we thought, why
Hmm.
can't we create a structure which allows people to invest in companies or back early stage companies with something as low as 5,000 rupees? And that is basically what TykeInvest.com is. So to answer your question, yes, you can call yourself an angel investor, although legally angel investor is defined a little differently. But
Right.
yes, the slang what angel investor means is anybody who is investing in early stage startups.
That makes a lot of sense. If I'm not wrong, the definition of angel investing for what the probably the financial body defines is also different from countries to countries, correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. There are uh, to be an angel investor per se, there are certain net worth and certain I would say experience requirements that you need to meet, even some level of requirements of how much of how little you can invest as well. uh,
Hmm.
I think in India it says 25 lakhs in 4 or 5 years.
Really interesting. I'm very keen to talk about this. That I feel companies like you're democratizing the startup investing ecosystem, because I was talking to some syndicates of angel investors, and people who are not from the startup ecosystem probably are not very familiar to this. But like a bunch of angel investors come and they invested together to probably hedge risk or to find better deal flow. And one thing that I was really fascinated, what I got to know about a couple of years ago, is it's it's not the amount of money that you have that differentiates you in the startup investing ecosystem. It's the access to deal flow. What kind of deals you're getting will differentiate you from probably like another syndicate or another investor or another angel investor per se. So I think, in my opinion, what you've done is made that access to deal flow really accessible, which might not be a big deal for somebody who's outside the startup ecosystem, but for somebody like me who has been studying the ecosystem for some time, it's a big deal. And I think that's something which really revolutionized the way I looked at companies like you completely.
No, absolutely. I think Ayush, you're right. It's not really about how much you invest, although there is a small nuance there as well. The minimum the minimum you invest using syndicates is still around 3, 4, 5 lakhs, right? Uh, so our approach was that why can't we uh, solve for the bridge financing or this financing capability that a company needs from their own user base or potential users, right? That was the thinking, because if someone likes their product, has given a good NPS score to them, is talking about that product to their friends, uh, it is highly possible that they'd want to invest in it as well. So
Correct.
uh, so our target audience is not active angel investors per se, but it is
Mhm.
people who've not invested earlier. So 85% of people who are using Tyke Invest today are first time users or backers of such companies.
That's amazing, yeah. I think one thing that really fascinates me whenever I talk to founders is everybody has very different learnings while building a company.
Yeah.
Can you like very objectively put कि यार बॉस तीन चीज़ें तो ना मैंने बहुत like तीन चीज़ें सीखी मैंने in the last 2 years that were like maybe basic but revolutionary for me. Like I'll probably start with one example that I learned. I did not know how to delegate, and I never thought it's a skill. I never thought delegating is a skill, but after like years of probably failing and my first company not working out, I realized if I don't delegate well, then the company is in big trouble. Like this, what were your three learnings?
I think my biggest learning is that you can't start off a company with just one idea. It has to be a one product, right? It has to have a bigger picture. Uh, it has to be one product or one idea which leads to more products or ideas, which leads to
Okay.
an entire ecosystem. That's number one. Uh, so if you want to start off with one idea, it's a good opportunity, but it is not something which could change the game, right? Uh, Number two is I think over time I've learned that uh, it's important for startup founders to start trusting their gut. Um, I think there's a very interesting rule that Amazon says that if you're 70% there, just start it. Don't wait for 100%. That's not going to happen.
Right.
So number two is that, and number three is you need to develop people skills and motivational skills as soon as you can, because that's what's going to differentiate you compared to anybody else in the company or elsewhere.
I think the
So these
last
things for me.
point is so powerful because there are times when probably a team member who has, and it's not even their fault, right? Like a lot of people, a lot of times you can't share the big picture with a lot of people. For somebody who's doing incredible work for months and months and months, but they're not able to see the result, it can get really demotivating. While founders have long term interests and long term vision in mind, like a team member might not have that. And to be able to motivate them and to actually show them that bigger picture, I think that's a very important skill, and that storytelling skill is incredible that I've seen in some founders, and I think Steve Jobs is the biggest example of that. Like how he used to come on a stage and just wrap the entire theater around his stories, and everybody just focused on what he's saying. It's really incredible. One thing that I like to ask almost every founder is, and this is a very almost a heart to heart question, that every morning there's a certain level of anxiety that a lot of people wake up with. there's a funding winter going on. The startup ecosystem in general, there are so many layoffs. People are struggling. Founders are struggling. I know companies that are doing really well had a killer idea, but now I see a news that they are either potentially shutting down or they're already shut down or they're in talks of like a not so good acquisition. How do you deal with this? I'm sure kabhi na kabhi to hota hoga. Even if your company is successful, then the anxiety is, can I now bring it to another level? How do you deal with it? It must not be easy.
So I think anxiety is not that bad, right? I was actually watching this one this show We Crashed recently, which is a
Okay.
story of the downfall of WeWork, and
Okay.
uh, and and the only thing, the only word that they use for the founder Adam Newman throughout is that you have fortitude. Fortitude basically means the ability to turn things around when things aren't working well, right? So people with fortitude are the ones who win. That's literally what the show is based about, right? So although I mean things went south later, but he took it to a massive scale. Uh,
Right.
so the point or the learning here is that you need to be resilient, and if anxiety converts into an idea, an opportunity, that is how you need to think, you need to look at it, right? So for example, you're saying funding winter, you're saying companies are shutting down. Is that an opportunity for you to create a monopolistic like view in a crowded market, right?
Right.
uh, Companies are shutting down, or they're being acquired. uh, is that an opportunity for you to look at getting their best talent on board, right? So that's how you need to look at it. uh, Typically, I've said this earlier as well on LinkedIn, that I don't think any early stage or any startup which is still in the earlier phases will ever face funding winter.
Right.
And companies which have good unit economics, are making money on every trade, will ever have a funding problem.
Hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think these are the times when those gems are formed because
Yeah, because what's happened is that typically companies which were burning money with
hmm,
the eventual hope, or this very famous word in the ecosystem called LTV,
right.
will be achieved. They have struggled to do so at that stage, right? They've miscalculated the LTV number. Because the
Hmm.
LTV number was miscalculated, uh, that is where the valuation of the company goes haywire,
Correct.
which was not the case earlier, right? Uh, Now, because now nobody would want, no founder would like to do a down round or would like to raise money at a lower valuation, right?
Correct.
So that is where layoffs happen. So the whole cycle is based on predicting how much money are you making per user over a period of time. Now that would not, if you're running businesses which are unit economics wise positive, we call it contribution margins in
Hmm.
finance. If you have a positive contribution margin, uh, then these scenarios are slightly rare for you. There are companies which are raising rounds, slice just backed around, uh, of businesses doing the best work they can do. There's a edtech company recently which became a unicorn in just Series A called Physics Wala. So companies which are fundamentally
Right.
built on good unit economics and are able to predict a certain LTV still makes sense. But if you're running a company burning cash with the assumption that after 3 years I will make a certain amount of money from this user, and that is where I am on a 4:1 LTV CAC ratio, or whatever it is. That is where things sort of go south.
Right. For the audience, LTV is lifetime value of a customer, and CAC is customer acquisition cost. But that makes a lot of sense. I think what you said, companies which are on a very fundamental level have a very strong way to make money. If not now, then eventually will survive, and this should survive. I think. In fact, from a founder's perspective as well, the we had a very hard time hiring in the last 1 year, but now we are seeing that hiring is also becoming easier because companies are not
Yeah.
throwing money. There is there is a very fair value of talent as well that is now being associated, which I think there are corrections happening everywhere, whether it's hiring or whether it's valuations of companies or companies being given cash with just like something that's not even that robust or strong. So I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. We're almost at the end of the podcast. I want to ask you something which is very general, and this is something which really fascinates me. I want to understand like what's Karan's everyday day like how do you like describe ki acha, this is how my day goes like.
Uh, so I think I start off my day pretty early.
Hmm.
Uh, there's some reading, there is some level of walk or swim or exercise, something happens. Uh, I come to work pretty much in a very scheduled manner. I think one another advice I'd like to add is that uh, founders need to start planning their day in 30-minute slots on their calendars, right? I think it's so important. It's so peaceful. It solves most of the anxiety problems as well. Uh, so I think that is something. So that's something I do every morning or the night before. Uh, so pretty much anything from product to sales. I don't think I have a specific role here. Sometimes it's just preparing for some meetings. Sometimes it's in-person client meetings now because that started. Uh,
Right.
but 30-minute slots or maximum 1 hour slots uh, of tasks I have to do. I try to limit my tasks to not more than 7 to 10 a day, uh, because I think we're at a stage where the quality of work will matter more now. Uh,
Right.
so that's something I'm working on personally. And yeah, less firefighting is always a task. I don't think my day goes well or had a very good day if I'm coming home later, if I'm clocking more hours. I don't think it works like that. Uh, for
Right.
me, it's about having a day where your metrics are met or having a
Hmm.
week where your metrics are met. And there was no level of panic or firefighting that was required, right? I actually think founders have started glorifying the fact that hustle is great. Hustle is great, but I think the definition of hustle is sort of been misconstrued now.
I'd like to just add one more thing. It's something which I started this year. I call this an absolute win framework. So this is how I structure
Okay.
it. I realized that as a company, when we were growing, initially we were pitching to brands, and we had a 100% strike rate. We then realized that we are now right now pitching to 20 brands. Now we're pitching to like 50 brands, 60 brands. There are bound to be, we're bound to lose pitches, even, and that could happen because of 10, 20 different reasons. And then we realized that a day could, I don't want in a day that there are only losses, right? Even if the team has done a great job, there could be a day where we're losing every pitch. So every day I keep one or two meetings where I know there'll be an absolute win. Now this could be a client that I know is really really happy with us. This could be an internal meeting, or us probably doing something internally that I know is going really really well. And this has changed my day. That the day is going probably not so great, but just to keep my morale high, I always keep that 30-minute meeting where I feel, it's like it's almost
Yeah.
सेल्फ वैलिडेशन कि अपने आप को पैड ऑन द
Yeah.
बैक कि ठीक है ठीक है ठीक है ठीक है चलो हो रहा है करेंगे करेंगे. And even though it sounds very basic, it has changed my day. Like it has changed the way like my motivation flows through the day. It's, I think, a really solid thing. One should definitely try it out, I feel. But
No, absolutely,
um
absolutely. I think the only challenge is you've been fairly successful. Not everybody can have absolute wins every day.
Arey, I think that's where you have to trick your brain. Then you have to do meetings where
Yeah.
you know for a fact that you will feel good.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For
But
sure.
thank you so much, Karan, for coming on this conversation. It was really really fun talking to you. I think I learned a lot. One of my, I think, key takeaways was what you said. What your mentor told me, that you focus on one process once, build it into like a proper like machine factory process, whatever you want to call it, and then you step away from that. You shouldn't go into like a problem the second or the third time. I think that was my key takeaway, something that I really need to learn even further to make sure that the company scales more and more. So thank you so much for giving me and the audience like a lot of gyan. I'd like to just ask you one more question. If you had to ask me one question in this podcast, what would that question be?
How are you getting 100% strike rate? I want to know that.
Now we are not. I think initially, and it's something which I think is a very interesting strategy. So the first company I started in 2019 didn't work out at all, like an absolute failure. So the second time we knew that we have to be very, very targeted in our approach. And that's why the kind of companies you're reaching out with and the proposals that we are reaching out with were so pointed that I know for a fact that no other media company is writing these proposals. So that led us to make, initially that led us to make a very unique space in the market through which we gained like a lot of trust. So that led us to, almost 100% strike rate until about, I think, November last year. After that, the team grew a lot, and then we started doing a lot of pitches. People started coming to us with pitches. And when people come to you with pitches, they're usually also reaching out to 10 other companies like you. So I think now we are almost used to the fact that there will be like more losses than wins in the company. If you don't have more losses than wins, then you're not pitching enough. And in our industry as well, it's a matter of, because every company is reaching out to 10 companies, there's no possible way that you can have more wins. Like it's said in the startup ecosystem as well, you don't need a lot of yeses. You only need a few yeses to
Yeah,
make your
yeah,
life
yeah.
amazing. So that's the kind of philosophy that we have as well. But
Very, very interesting.
good conversation. Thanks so much for this. I hope you have a very good day. And for the audience as well, thank you so much for watching this episode. Do follow Tyke, Karan. We'll have all the links in the description, and we'll have some interesting coupon codes as well for you to try out. And thank you so much, Karan. This was very, very nice hosting you.
Thanks, Ayush. Thank you so much, and all the best. I think you should keep the podcast going.
Thank you so much.